Hey y'all, Jesus tells a fascinating story starting with Matthew 18:23. It's the story of a servant who owed the king a huge amount of money, basically say a year's wages worth of money. And when the king asked for the money, the servant threw himself on the king's mercy and said, I don't have it, but if you'll give me time, I'll pay back everything I owe you. And the king said, you know what? Don't worry about it. I'm going to write it off. I'm not going to hold you accountable for that money anymore. It's going to be like you never owed me anything. And the servant left the king, and it doesn't say what his mindset was. It doesn't say whether he was fretting over that huge amount of money. It didn't say whether he was panicked because he didn't trust the king. All it says is that he went to another servant who owed him a very small amount of money, say a day's worth of wages. And he demanded that money from the other servant. And the servant, just like the first servant did, threw himself on the man's mercy and said, please, I'll pay you everything you owe. I'll pay you everything I owe. Just give me a little bit of time. Well, the first servant, even though the king had forgiven him such a huge amount of money, said, no, I'm going to put you in prison until you can pay it all back. And that's what he did. Well, the other servants were watching, and they went to their master and they told him what happened. And the king called that first servant back into him and he said, why did you do that? I forgave you everything, and it was a huge amount of money. And yet, this very small portion that another servant owed you, you made him pay a huge penalty for it. You know what? I'm going to turn you over to be tortured until you can pay that money back. And that's exactly what happened. Now, here's what's interesting. It's interesting because it teaches us something about what forgiveness is and what forgiveness isn't. But it also teaches us the penalty when we refuse to forgive. If we refuse to forgive someone, we are tortured. More than likely, the person we haven't forgiven isn't thinking about us at all. But we are constantly bothered by what they did. We don't let it go. It runs through our minds constantly. It tortures us. But the other thing this parable or this story teaches us is it teaches us a way to look at forgiveness so that we can find it more easy to do. It teaches us to consider it as if someone doesn't owe us anything anymore. So often when we need to forgive someone, we feel like they owe us something, whether it's an apology, whether it's them making restitution, whether it's them making something right. We feel like they owe us. But to forgive is to say, you don't owe me anything anymore. And that makes it a little bit easier because we're not saying what you did is okay. We're not saying what you did wasn't wrong. All we're saying is, you don't owe me anything at all for what you did to me. Not even an apology. Oh, apologies are nice, but oftentimes apologies don't heal our hearts anyway. Forgiveness is something that we have to choose to do, and sometimes we choose it against enormous odds. But Jesus isn't asking us to do something or to give something that He hasn't already given us. He gave you a huge supply of forgiveness when He forgave you and when He forgave me. So He's asking us, out of that supply of forgiveness, to forgive other people. Now, I know that there can be layers to forgiveness, and I know that sometimes we have mentally rehearsed what someone did to us so often that we have to re-forgive them, but those are topics for a different creative moment. Thank you so much for joining me today, and I hope to hear from you soon. If you'd like to see more of these video devotions, you can find them at acreativeword.com. I'll talk to you later.